Well, you have to keep in mind that the advisors to Donald Trump come from the same stock as the advisors that advised Joe Biden and advised Barack Obama before him, advised Donald Trump during his first administration. These are Russophobic minded people whose singular goal is the destruction of Russia. Straight up simple. They will not accept anything that allows Russia to emerge victorious, even if that victory doesn't infringe on the United States or anything that enhances Russia's stature. This is a purely zero-sum game. Anything that's good for Russia is bad for the United States in the minds of these people. And so long as they advise Donald Trump, that'll be the policy set that they put in. Look, President Putin was being very diplomatic. Lavrov wasn't. Let's just make it as clear as possible. Russia went to war in Ukraine because of Ukraine's potential of becoming a NATO nation. Russia's winning that war. Russia's not going to allow Ukraine ever to be a member of NATO, ever. It's not on the books. It's a waste of time to even discuss it. So anybody in the Trump administration that's putting forward a plan that's postulated on some eventual Ukrainian membership is, as President Putin said accurately, if they're not ready now, that means that you're going to get them ready. And then what happens when they are ready? And Russia's not going to let that happen. So
they will never allow Russia to win. It's a zero-sum game. No matter who sits in the White House, the war machine marches on. Scott Ritter just made a chilling claim. The advisors behind U.S. foreign policy don't change, no matter who is president. The goal is the same: deny Russia any victory at any cost. And if Trump returns, the policy will not soften. It may even harden. Russia's war in Ukraine, its existential battle, will not end with diplomacy. It will only escalate. As we analyze the latest updates, it becomes clear that the war in Ukraine has entered a decisive and dramatic phase. With negotiations set to take place in Saudi Arabia between Russian and U.S. delegations, the very future of Ukraine hangs in the balance. While Western leaders gather to decide the fate of the conflict, an unexpected turn of events has surfaced, one that raises serious questions about President Zelensky's next moves. His sudden arrival in the United Arab Emirates, coupled with an urgent economic agreement between Ukraine and the UAE, suggests that something far more complex is unfolding behind the scenes. Is this merely a diplomatic maneuver, or could it be the prelude to Zelensky's escape as Russia advances on all fronts? Let's break down the shocking developments and uncover the deeper implications of this rapidly evolving situation. Tomorrow, on February 18th, high-ranking officials from the United States and Russia will convene in Saudi Arabia for critical negotiations on Ukraine. Among those in attendance will be U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Pence, and U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for the Middle East Steve Witw. On the Russian side, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and senior diplomat Ushakov will represent Moscow. These talks mark a turning point. For the first time, Russia has openly declared that Ukraine's sovereignty will be a topic of discussion, a staggering statement that hints at major geopolitical shifts. Reports suggest that the United States and Russia may be on the brink of agreeing to a roadmap that will shape Ukraine's future for the next 6 months. The key question: will Ukraine have any say in this agreement? While Zelensky's administration insists that it will not participate in these negotiations, his recent actions tell a different story. Just hours before the scheduled meeting, Zelensky and his wife arrived in the United Arab Emirates under the pretense of discussing the release of Ukrainian prisoners. But the timing, location, and nature of his visit suggest a far more pressing motive. Zelensky's presence in the UAE is not just a routine diplomatic trip. It aligns perfectly with the looming U.S.-Russia negotiations, fueling speculation that he wants to position himself as close as possible to the talks, just in case an opportunity arises to intervene. But there's another, more unsettling theory. This trip might be part of a carefully orchestrated escape plan. The most critical detail: a newly signed comprehensive economic partnership agreement between Ukraine and the UAE finalized on February 17th. This agreement is no ordinary trade deal. Among its provisions, 99% of Ukrainian goods will gain full access to the UAE market, elimination of duties on digital trade and protection of personal data, simplified market access, and removal of barriers for Ukrainian businesses. Ukrainian entrepreneurs can now own up to 70% of companies in the UAE and up to 100% in select sectors. On the surface, this appears to be an economic lifeline for Ukraine, but upon closer examination, it raises serious red flags. Why would Zelensky prioritize an economic deal with the UAE at this exact moment? Why is there an emphasis on digital trade, financial transactions, and personal data protection? The answer becomes clearer when we consider the possibility that Zelensky is preparing to transfer vast amounts of wealth out of Ukraine before making his escape. By removing financial barriers between Ukraine and the UAE, Zelensky has created the perfect conditions to transfer funds discreetly. The clause on elimination of duties on digital trade and protection of personal data is especially alarming. It ensures that large sums of money can be moved without revealing the sender's identity. Adding to the suspicion is the fact that Zelensky's wife is also present in the UAE. If Zelensky were simply attending diplomatic meetings, why bring his family? The most logical explanation is that this trip is about securing his assets and establishing a financial foothold outside Ukraine. One possibility is that Zelensky is in the process of setting up a company in the UAE, potentially under his wife's name. This would allow him to legally transfer wealth out of Ukraine without drawing attention. If the war situation deteriorates further, he could easily transition from a head of state to a wealthy exile. While Zelensky is busy securing his financial future, Ukraine's front lines are crumbling. Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces have made significant gains, capturing key strategic positions with minimal resistance. Southern Donetsk. Russian troops have launched a large-scale assault, capturing the settlement of Novosilka. Ukrainian defenses have failed to hold, allowing Russian forces to push deeper into Ukrainian territory. Zaporizhzhia region. A massive convoy of Russian tanks and armored vehicles is advancing towards key Ukrainian strongholds. Ukrainian forces attempted to slow them down, but the sheer scale of the Russian offensive has overwhelmed defensive lines. Bakhmut axis. Russian units have crossed the Mokra-Yaly River and are tightening their grip on Ukrainian positions. Ukrainian forces have desperately bombed Russian supply lines, but Moscow's forces continue to push forward. Avdiivka. Russian forces have encircled Ukrainian troops in the region, forcing Kyiv's military into a dangerous retreat. Reports indicate that Ukrainian commanders are running out of reserves, with no reinforcements available. The situation is dire. The Ukrainian military is buying time, not for a counteroffensive, but to allow Zelensky to finalize his escape. With U.S. and Russian officials meeting tomorrow in Saudi Arabia, the geopolitical landscape is shifting. The overwhelming consensus is that Washington and Moscow are working toward a deal that excludes Ukraine's leadership. The biggest losers in this agreement? Ukraine and the European Union. If the US and Russia reach an agreement, Ukraine will likely be forced to accept territorial concessions. The European Union will be sidelined, left to deal with the economic fallout and potential energy shortages as the US strikes exclusive deals with Russia. Russia will emerge stronger than ever, solidifying its territorial gains while normalizing relations with Washington. Meanwhile, Zelensky seems to have realized that his days as Ukraine's leader are numbered. His frantic efforts to secure financial assets in the UAE indicate that he has no intention of staying to face the consequences. As Russian forces tighten their grip on Ukraine and global powers negotiate behind closed doors, Zelensky's sudden maneuvers point to one conclusion: he is preparing to flee. As we wrap up this explosive update on the situation in Ukraine, one thing is crystal clear. This war is entering a decisive and brutal phase. The geopolitical landscape is shifting at breakneck speed. Behind the scenes, powerful negotiations are taking place, shaping the future of Ukraine, Russia, and even the global balance of power. The talks in Saudi Arabia could be the moment that determines Ukraine's fate, and yet Zelensky's movements suggest he is already preparing for a possible escape. The signing of an economic partnership agreement with the UAE raises serious questions about his true intentions. Is he securing financial safe havens, quietly moving assets, and setting up an exit plan before everything collapses around him? If so, what does that mean for the future of Ukraine? Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the situation for Ukrainian forces is deteriorating rapidly. The Russian war machine is advancing on multiple fronts, pressing hard against collapsing Ukrainian defenses. The once defiant resistance seems to be crumbling under the weight of relentless offensives, dwindling supplies, and a leadership that may no longer be fully committed to the fight. Every hour counts as Russian troops push deeper into key strategic locations, tightening their grip on territories that once seemed untouchable. The videos and reports emerging from the front lines paint a grim picture. Ukrainian soldiers fighting desperately against overwhelming odds, attempting to slow down Russian advances but ultimately losing ground. And let's not forget the global implications. If the United States and Russia finalize a deal behind closed doors, how will NATO respond? What about Europe? Will Ukraine be forced to accept terms that ultimately benefit Washington and Moscow while leaving Kyiv out in the cold? The economic consequences of such a deal could reshape global trade, energy policies, and even alliances. Europe, which has heavily backed Ukraine, may find itself sidelined as the US and Russia carve out their spheres of influence. The fallout from these decisions will echo far beyond Ukraine's borders, potentially shifting the balance of power for years to come. So, what happens next? Will Zelensky flee, confirming suspicions that he has lost faith in the fight? Will Ukraine's front lines collapse entirely, allowing Russia to impose its will unchallenged? Or will something unexpected turn the tide at the last moment? As always, we will be monitoring the situation closely, bringing you real-time updates and deep analysis. This war is not just about territory, it's about power, survival, and the future of an entire region. The next few days could be among the most pivotal moments in modern history. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more intense. If you found this update insightful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Zelensky is preparing to escape? Will Russia secure a deal that changes the course of the war? Let's discuss. See you in the next update. Stay sharp, stay informed, and as always, keep watching.